Hello, everyone. I know many of you listen while falling asleep. Before you drift off, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's case. September 20th, 1988, a Tuesday morning in Belen, New Mexico. The sun rose over the high desert landscape, casting long shadows across the quiet streets of this small town. Population just over 6,000. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where doors were left unlocked, where children played outside until the streetlights came on. It was the kind of morning that promised nothing but routine. Tara Leigh Calico woke early that day. She had a ritual every morning. She would eat a light breakfast, lace up her sneakers, and take her bike out for a long ride along Highway 47. It was her time. The rhythm of the pedals, the wind in her hair, the open road stretching before her. She had been doing this for years. That morning, she kissed her mother goodbye and told her she'd be back by noon. She had plans with her boyfriend later that afternoon. She wanted to play tennis. She wanted to laugh. She wanted to enjoy the rest of her day. Her mother, Patty Dole, watched her daughter leave. She had no idea it would be the last time she would ever see Tara alive. By noon, Tara had not returned. By 1 o'clock, Patty began to worry. By 2 o'clock, she knew something was terribly wrong. Tara Calico had vanished without a trace. Tara Leigh Calico was 19 years old. She was a student at the University of Mexico in Albuquerque, studying psychology. She was bright, driven, curious about the world. She to read. She loved music. She had a quick smile and a kind heart. Her friends described her as bubbly, energetic, someone who lit up a room just by walking into it. She was close with her family. Her mother, Patty, was her best friend. They talked about everything. Dreams, fears, boys. Tara had big plans. She wanted to finish school. Maybe become a therapist, help people work through their trauma. She wanted to make a difference. She had a boyfriend named John. They'd been together for a while. He adored her. She adored him. They talked about the future too. Marriage maybe. Kids, one day. But for now they were young. They were happy. Tara was also fiercely independent. She didn't wait for anyone to give her permission to live her life. She took her bike rides alone because she enjoyed the solitude, she enjoyed the freedom. She enjoyed the feeling of pushing her body, testing her limits, feeling strong and capable. Her mother used to worry. Don't go alone, Patty would say sometimes. Take someone with you. But Tara would just smile. I'll be fine, Mom. I always am, and she always had been, until that Tuesday morning. Her life seemed perfect. She was admired by everyone who knew her. She had everything ahead of her. A future filled with possibility. She did not deserve what happened to her. But there had been small cracks. Small things that in hindsight felt like warnings. A few weeks before she disappeared, Tara had mentioned something to her mother. She said that sometimes on her bike rides, she felt like she was being followed. A vehicle would come up behind her, slow down, match her pace. She couldn't always see who was driving. Sometimes it was a truck, sometimes a van. It made her uncomfortable. But she brushed it off. Highway 47 was a public road. People drove on it all the time. It didn't mean anything. Still, Patty worried. Maybe you should change your route, she suggested. Tara considered it. But she loved that route. It was familiar. It was hers. So she kept riding it. There had also been strange phone calls. Nothing overt. Nothing threatening. Just odd. Someone would call the house, and when Tara or her mother answered, there would be silence on the other end. Then a clicking. It happened a few times. Patty thought it was a wrong number. Tara thought it was a prank. Neither of them thought it was dangerous. And then there was the tension in town. Belen was a quiet place, but it wasn't without its problems. There had been reports of suspicious vehicles cruising through neighborhoods, people lingering in parking lots. A few women had reported feeling followed, though nothing had come of it. The police chalked it up to paranoia. But now, looking back, those small crack-like fissures in the foundation of safety, something had been wrong, and no one had seen it coming. Let's walk through that morning. Tara woke up around 9:30 a.m. She ate some juice. She was in good spirits. She talked with her mother about her plans for the day. The bike ride, tennis with John, maybe a movie later. She pulled on her biking clothes, a pink t-shirt, white tennis shorts, sneakers. She grabbed her Sony Walkman and clipped it to her waistband. She loved listening to music while she rode. It made the miles pass faster. She wheeled her bike out of the garage. It was a bright pink Huffy, 10-speed. Nothing fancy but reliable. She had ridden it hundreds of times. Patty watched her from the doorway. "Be back by noon, Patty, call Will," Tara called back. And then she was gone. She pedaled down the street, turned onto Highway 47, and began her route. It was a 36-mile loop. She had done it so many times she could do it with her eyes closed. She knew every turn, every landmark. The morning air was cool. The sky was clear. The desert stretched out on either side, endless and quiet. She pedaled, mile after mile. The music played in her ears. She was alone, but she wasn't. Somewhere along that route, someone was watching her. Someone had been watching her for a while. And on that morning, they decided to act. We don't know exactly when it happened. We don't know exactly where. But we know it was sometime between 9:30 a.m. and noon. Witnesses would later come forward. They said they saw Tara riding her bike along Highway 47. They said she looked normal, happy even, headphones in, pedaling steadily. But they also saw something else, a vehicle. Some said it was a light, colored pickup truck. Others said it was a van. The descriptions varied, but the common thread was this: a vehicle was following her. It stayed behind her for a while, matching her speed. One witness said they saw the vehicle pull up alongside Tara. They couldn't see what happened next. They kept driving. Another witness said they saw Tara's bike lying in the ditch on the side of the road. But when they drove past again later, the bike was gone. No one stopped. No one thought to call the police. Because in a small town like Belen in 1988, people didn't assume the worst. They assumed there was a simple explanation. But there wasn't. By noon, Tara had not returned home. Patty tried not to panic. Maybe Tara had lost track of time. Maybe she had stopped to talk to a friend. Maybe her bike had a flat tire and she was walking it home. But Tara had promised to be back by noon. She had plans. She wouldn't just disappear without calling. By 12:30, Patty called John. "Have you seen Tara?" she asked. "No," John said. "She was supposed to meet me at 1. She's not there yet." "No," Patty said. Her voice was tight. John said he would drive the road. Look for her. Maybe she had crashed. Maybe she was hurt. He drove Highway 47. He didn't find her bike. He didn't find anything. By 2 o'clock, Patty called the police. The Valencia County Sheriff's Office responded to the call. At first, they weren't too concerned. A 19-year-old girl out for a bike ride. Couple hours late. It happened. She was probably fine. But Patty Doyle was "This isn't like her," Patty said. "She always comes home. She always calls if she's going to be late. Something is wrong." The deputies took down the information. They asked for a description of Tara. Height 5 feet 7 inches, weight around 120 pounds. Long dark brown hair, brown eyes. Wearing a pink t-shirt, white shorts, sneakers. They asked about the bike, pink Huffy, 10 speed. They asked about the road she took, Highway 47, a loop, 36 miles. They said they would look into it. But hours passed. And nothing, no sign of Tara, no sign of her bike. By evening, the case had escalated. This wasn't just a girl running late. This was a missing person. The sheriff's office organized a search party. Volunteers combed Highway 47 on foot, in cars, on horseback. They searched the fields, the desert scrub. They looked for any sign of Tara. A dropped item. Blood. They found nothing. It was as if she had been erased. But then a break. Witnesses started coming forward. A woman said she had been driving on Highway 47 that morning around 11:30. She saw a young woman on a pink bike. She also saw a light, colored Ford pickup truck driving slowly behind the cyclist. The woman didn't think much of it at the time, but now, hearing about the disappearance, she realized it might be important. Another witness, a man, said he saw the same thing. A pickup truck. Light colored. Possibly white or beige. It had been following a girl on a bike. He said the truck had a camper shell on the back. Another witness said they saw Tara's bike lying on the side of the road, near mile marker 13. But when they drove past again 20 minutes later, the bike was gone. The police zeroed in on that area. They searched it thoroughly. They found tire tracks. Fresh. Leading off the highway into the dirt. They found a cassette tape. Tara's mother confirmed it was the same type Tara used in her Walkman. They found pieces of broken plastic, possibly from a bike reflector, but no Tara, no bike, no body. The investigation expanded. The FBI was called in. This was now a federal case, possible kidnapping. They interviewed everyone who lived along Highway 47. They asked about suspicious vehicles, suspicious people, anything unusual. Most people had nothing to offer, but a few did. One man said he had seen a light-colored pickup truck parked on the side of the road near mile marker 13 that morning. He said it looked like someone was loading something into the back. He couldn't see what. He didn't stop. Another person said they had seen a man standing near a white van in the same area. The man looked nervous, kept looking around. But again, they didn't stop. The police asked for descriptions of the vehicles. Light-colored pickup. Camper shall possibly afford. White van. No other details. They ran these descriptions through their database. Hundreds of vehicles matched. It was a dead end. The media picked up the story. Tara's face was on the news, in the new flyers plastered all over Belen and Albuquerque. Her mother made emotional pleas. "Please," Patty said, tears streaming down her face. "If anyone knows anything, please come forward. Please help us bring Tara home." The community rallied. Search parties went out every day. Volunteers walked the desert, called Tara's name, hoping for a miracle. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. No sign of Tara. The case grew cold, but Patty Dole never gave up. She kept searching, kept pushing the police, kept the story alive, because she knew in her heart that Tara was still out there, somewhere. The police had no shortage of theories. Some believed Tara had run away, that she had staged her own disappearance, that she was tired of her life and wanted to start over somewhere new. But those who knew her dismissed this immediately. Tara had no reason to run. She was happy. She was in school. She had a loving family, a boyfriend, friends, a future. Why would she throw it all away? Still, the police investigated the possibility. They looked into her finances. No unusual withdrawals. No secret bank accounts. They talked to her friends. No one knew of any plans to leave. No one had heard from her. They talked to John, her boyfriend. He was devastated. He broke down during the interview. He said he had no idea what happened. He said he loved her. He wanted to marry her. Another theory: Tara had been hit by a car. The driver panicked, hit her body, and fled. But this didn't explain the bike being moved. It didn't explain the lack of blood at the scene. And it didn't explain the witnesses who saw a vehicle following her. Then there was the theory that a stranger had abducted her. This seemed most likely. But who? The police looked at known offenders in the area. Sex offenders, violent criminals, anyone with a history. They interviewed dozens of people. Most had alibis. None seemed connected to Tara. But there was one man who caught their attention. His name was never publicly released. But according to reports, he was a local man, mid-30s. Lived near Highway 47. He had a history of peeping, voyeurism, following women. He had been questioned before about other incidents, but nothing had ever stuck. When the police questioned him about Tara, he was nervous, evasive. He couldn't account for his whereabouts on the morning of September 20th. He said he had been home, alone, no witnesses. The police searched his property. They found nothing, no bike, no evidence, no sign of Tara. They had to let him go, but they kept him on their radar. There were other suspects too. A transient who had been seen in the area around the time Tara disappeared. He had a history of assault. A co-worker of Tara's mother who had made inappropriate comments about Tara in the past. He had access to the family's schedule. A man who had been convicted of kidnapping years earlier in another state. He had recently moved to New Mexico. Each lead was investigated. Each lead went nowhere. The case was stalling. And then, 9 months later, something happened that changed everything. June 1989. A woman in Port St. Joe, Florida, found a Polaroid photograph in the parking lot of a convenience store. She almost didn't pick it up, but something about it made her stop. The photograph showed 2 young people bound and gagged in the back of what looked like a van. A young woman and a young boy. Both looked terrified. The woman took the photograph to the police. When the Port St. Joe police saw it, they immediately contacted the FBI. Because the young woman in the photograph looked exactly like Tara Calico. The photograph was released to the public. Patty Dole saw it. She broke down. Patty said, "That's my daughter. I know it."
That's Tara.
Scotland Yard analyzed the photograph. They confirmed that the young woman bore a striking resemblance to Tara. They pointed out similarities in facial structure, hair, even a scar on her leg that matched one Tara had. The book visible in the photograph was V.C. Andrew's My Sweet Audrina. Patty confirmed that Tara had been reading that exact book before she disappeared. It seemed like undeniable proof. Tara was alive. Or at least, she had been when the photograph was taken. But who took the photograph? And where was Tara now? The FBI launched a massive investigation. They analyzed the photograph for clues. The background showed wood paneling, a window with a curtain. Generic, but they hoped someone might recognize it. The tape used to bind the victims appeared to be duct tape, common, hard to trace. The book in the photograph was examined. The edition, the publication date, anything that might narrow down a timeline. They tried to identify the boy in a photograph. Some believed it was Michael Henley, a 9-year-old boy who had disappeared from a camping trip in New Mexico in April 1988, 5 months before Tara vanished. His parents saw the photograph. They were convinced it was their son. The cases seemed of 2 missing people from New Mexico, both possibly held captive. But then in 1990, Michael Henley's remains were found near the campsite where he had disappeared. He had died of exposure. He had never been kidnapped. So who was the boy in the photograph? And if it wasn't Michael Henley, was the girl really Tara Calico? The Polaroid photograph changed everything. Before it surfaced, the case had been about a missing girl, a tragic disappearance, a family's desperate search for answers. But now it was about something darker: captivity, torture, a possible trafficking ring. The FBI created a task force dedicated specifically to the photograph. They brought in experts from across the country: forensic analysts, photo specialists, behavioral profilers. Everyone had the same question: who took this photograph, and why? The most chilling theory was that it was a trophy. Serial killers and abductors often kept photographs of their victims, to relive the moment, to maintain control, to savor their power over another human being. If this photograph was a trophy, then whoever took it might have taken Upton's. The FBI began searching for similar cases. They looked for missing persons in Florida, where the photograph was found. They looked in New Mexico, where Tara had disappeared. They expanded to neighboring states. They found several cases that seemed potentially connected, but nothing concrete, nothing that led them to a suspect. Meanwhile, Patty Dole became obsessed with the photograph. She stared at it for hours. She memorized every detail: the angle of Tara's body, the expression in her eyes, the book beside her. She was convinced it was her daughter. "I know my child," Patty said in interviews. "I know her face. I know her body. That is Tara." But not everyone agreed. Some forensic experts who analyzed the photograph said they couldn't be certain. The image quality was poor. The woman's face was partially obscured. The resemblance could be coincidental. The FBI officially stated that they could not definitively confirm the woman in the photograph was Tara Calico, but they also couldn't rule it out. Patty refused to accept the ambiguity. She hired private investigators. She contacted psychics. She followed every lead, no matter how unlikely. She appeared on television shows, Unsolved Mysteries, America's Most Wanted. She begged the public for help. "Someone knows something," she said. "Someone saw something, please come forward." Tips poured in. Thousands of them, most led nowhere, but some were promising. One caller said they had seen a young woman matching Tara's description at a truck stop in Texas in 1990. She had been with 2 men. She looked scared. The caller didn't intervene because they thought it was a domestic situation. Another caller said they had seen a van matching the description from the Polaroid parked outside a motel in Arizona. They said they heard screaming coming from inside. By the time police investigated these tips, weeks had passed. The van was gone. The woman was gone. Always they were too late. The police began to focus on a specific theory. What if Tara had been abducted by someone local? Someone who knew her routine. Someone who had been watching her. They went back to the list of suspects they had compiled in the early days of the investigation. The Peeping Tom, who lived near Highway 47. the transient with a history of assault, the man who had made inappropriate comments about Tara. They re-interviewed each of them. The peeping Tom still couldn't provide an alibi, but he also had no connection to Florida, no reason to be in Port St. Joe, and a search of his property, conducted a second time with more thorough methods, still turned up nothing. The transient had moved on. They couldn't locate him. The man who made inappropriate comments about Tara broke down during the second interview. He admitted he had been attracted to Tara. He admitted he had thought about her, but he swore he had nothing to do with her disappearance. A polygraph test was inconclusive. The police had to move on. Then a new lead emerged. A woman came forward. She said that in September 1988, around the time Tara disappeared, she had been driving on Highway 47 when she saw something strange. A light-colored pickup truck was parked on the side of the road. The camper shell was open. Two men were standing at the back of the truck. They seemed to be arguing. The woman slowed down as she drove past. She saw something pink in the back of the truck. At the time, she thought it was a tarp, or camping gear. But now, years later, she realized it could have been Tara's bike. She described the men. One was in his 30s, dark hair, stocky build. He was wearing a denim jacket. The other was younger, maybe early 20s, thin, nervous looking. She said she had driven past them quickly. She didn't want to get involved in whatever they were arguing about. But now, she couldn't stop thinking about it. What if I could have saved her? The woman said, crying. What if I had just stopped? The FBI took the description seriously. They created composite sketches based on the woman's account. The sketches were distributed to police departments of New Mexico and neighboring states. They were shown on the news. Do you recognize these men? Dozens of tips came in. People said the sketches looked like their neighbor, their coworker, their guy they went to high school with. But none of the tips panned out. The men in the sketches were never identified. Another theory began to circulate. What if the photograph wasn't taken in 1989? What if it was older? What if the woman in the photograph wasn't Tara at all, but someone who simply resembled her? This theory gained traction when another Polaroid photograph surfaced. This one was found in a parking lot in Texas in 1990. It showed a young woman bound and gagged lying on a mattress. She looked unconscious, or dead. The woman's face was not clearly visible, but some people thought she looked like Tara. Patty Doyle saw the photograph. She wasn't sure. The FBI analyzed it. They said it could be connected to the first Polaroid, or it could be a completely separate case. There was no way to know for certain. The investigation was becoming a labyrinth. Every lead branched into more questions. Every answer revealed new mysteries. The police were frustrated. The FBI was frustrated. Patty Doyle was heartbroken. I just want to know what happened to my daughter, she said. I just want to bring her home. But the truth remained elusive. Let's talk about what the police actually found. In the weeks and months after Tara's disappearance, investigators combed through every piece of physical evidence they could locate. The cassette tape found near mile marker 13 was sent to a lab. It was confirmed to be the same brand Tara used, but there were no fingerprints on it, no DNA. The tire tracks found at the scene were analyzed. They were consistent with a light-duty pickup truck, possibly a Ford Ranger or Chevrolet S10. Common vehicles, thousands of them in New Mexico alone. The pieces of broken plastic were determined to be from a bike reflector, consistent with the type used on Tara's bike. But again, no fingerprints, no DNA. The problem was that the evidence was circumstantial. It suggested Tara had been at that location. It suggested her bike had been at that location. But it didn't tell them who took her, or where she was now. The police also looked into Tara's personal life. They searched her room, her belongings, her journals. They were looking for anything that might indicate she had been in danger. Threats, stalkers, secret relationships. They found nothing. Tara's journals were full of normal teenage thoughts. School stress, boyfriend drama, plans for the future. There was no mention of anyone following her. No mention of feeling unsafe except for one entry. It was dated 2 weeks before she disappeared. Felt weird on my ride today. Like someone was watching me. Probably just being paranoid. But it's happened a few times now. Maybe I should change my route. That was it. One sentence. But it was enough to confirm what Patty had said. Tara had felt like she was being followed. She had sensed the danger, but she hadn't taken it seriously enough. The police interviewed Tara's friends. Did anyone ever talk about her in a creepy way? Did anyone ever follow her? Did she mention any strange encounters? Most of her friends said no, but one friend, Sarah, remembered something. She said that a few months before Tara disappeared, they had been at a gas station together. Tara had gone inside to pay. Sarah had stayed in the car. While she was waiting, a man approached the car. Scruffy. He asked Sarah if she knew Tara. Yeah, Sarah said. Why? The man smiled. She's pretty. Tell her, I said. Then he walked away. Sarah thought it was weird, but she didn't think much of it. She didn't even tell Tara. Now, years later, she couldn't stop thinking about it. What if that was him? Sarah said. What if he had been watching her all along? The police asked Sarah to describe the man. She couldn't remember much. It had been years. He was white, 30s, brown hair, maybe, average height. It wasn't enough. The police also looked into reports of suspicious vehicles in the area. In the weeks leading up to Tara's disappearance, several people in Belen had reported seeing a white van cruising through neighborhoods. It would drive slowly. Stop, sit for a while, then drive off. A few people had written down the license plate number. The police traced it. The van belonged to a man named Lawrence Romero. He lived in Albuquerque. He worked as a contractor. The police brought him in for questioning. Romero was nervous. He stammered. He avoided eye contact. Why were you in Belen? The police asked. I was looking for work, Romero said. I heard there were some construction jobs out there. Did you find any? No. So why did you keep coming back? Romero didn't have a good answer. The police searched his van. They found tools, rope, common items for a contractor, but also items that could be used in an abduction. They asked Romero where he was on the 20th, 1988. He said he didn't remember. It was years ago. They pushed him. He said he thought he was at home, but he wasn't sure. No alibi. The police were suspicious, but they didn't have enough to arrest him. They let him go, but they kept watching him. Months later, Romero was arrested for a different crime. He had been caught breaking into a woman's home. He was charged with burglary and attempted assault. While he was in custody, the police questioned him about Tara again. This time he had a lawyer. He refused to answer any questions. He was never charged in connection with Tara's disappearance. But many people believe he knows something. To this day, his name comes up in discussions about the case. The witness testimonies in Tara's case were both the biggest help and the biggest problem. On one hand, they provided crucial information, the type of vehicle, the location. On the other hand, they were inconsistent, contradictory, reliable. Let's break them down. Witness 1. The woman who saw the truck. She was driving on Highway 47 around 11:30 a.m. She saw a young woman on a pink bike. She saw a light-colored pickup truck following the cyclist. She described the truck as a Ford, beige or tan, with a camper shell. She said the truck was driving slowly, too slowly. She said it made her uncomfortable, but she didn't stop. When she was interviewed by police, she was confident in her account. But when she was interviewed a second time months later, she wasn't as sure. Maybe it wasn't beige, she said. Maybe it was white. I don't know. It's hard to remember. The police were frustrated. Memory is unreliable, especially months after the fact. But they had to work with what they had. Witness 2. The man who saw the bike in the ditch. He was driving on Highway 47 around noon. He saw a pink bike lying on the side of the road near mile marker 13. He didn't stop. He assumed someone had crashed and would come back for it later. When he drove past again, about 20 minutes later, the bike was gone. He thought someone had picked it up. He didn't think anything of it until he heard about Tara's disappearance. When the police interviewed him, he was adamant about what he saw. He was definitely bike, he said. 10 speed. Lying in the dirt. But he couldn't say for certain it was Tara's bike, and he couldn't say who had taken it. Witness 3. The woman who saw the men arguing. This was the witness who came forward years later. She said she saw 2 men standing at the back of a pickup truck. They were arguing. She saw something pink in the truck bed. She described the men in detail. One was stocky, dark hair, denim jacket. The other was thin, nervous looking. But when the police asked her to work with a sketch artist, she hesitated. It was so long ago, she said. I'm not sure I remember their faces clearly. The sketches were created based on her description, but she couldn't say with certainty that they were accurate. Maybe, she said. Maybe they look this, I don't know. Witness Foy, the truck stop employee. This witness came forward in 1990 after the Polaroid photograph was released. She said that in late 1988, a young woman matching Tara's description had come into the truck stop where she worked. The truck stop was in Texas, near the New Mexico border. The woman had been with two men. They were older, rough looking. The woman had gone to the bathroom. The witness said she looked scared. She had bruises on her arms. The witness wanted to ask if she was okay, but she didn't. I was young, the witness said. I was scared to get involved. When the woman came out of the bathroom, the men were waiting for her. They left together. The witness never saw them again. When the police asked for more details, the witness couldn't provide much. She didn't remember what the men looked like. She didn't see what kind of vehicle they were driving. She just remembered that the woman looked scared. The problem with witness testimonies. The police wanted to believe these witnesses. They wanted to believe that each sighting was a piece of the puzzle. But the testimonies didn't fit together neatly. The truck in one account was beige. In another, it was white. The men were described differently by different witnesses. The timeline didn't always make sense. How could Tara's bike be seen in the ditch at noon if she had been taken earlier? Why would the abductors leave the bike on the side of the road, only to come back and take it later? The police tried to reconcile the accounts. They created timelines, flowcharts. But the more they tried to make sense of it, the more confusing it became. There were several pieces of evidence that didn't make sense. Let's start with the bike. If Tara was abducted while riding her bike, what happened to it? One witness said they saw it lying in the ditch. Another said they saw something pink in the back of a truck. But the bike was never found. Not in the ditch, not in the desert, not in a landfill. It vanished, just like Tara. Some theorized they took the bike to eliminate evidence. But why? Why risk being seen driving around with a bright pink bike in the back of your truck? Why not just leave it on the side of the road? It didn't make sense. Then there was the cassette tape. It was found near mile marker 13, the same area where the bike was reportedly seen. But it was found several days after Tara disappeared. Why wasn't it found during the initial search? Had someone placed it there later? Or had the searchers simply missed it? The police couldn't say for certain. And then there was the Polaroid photograph, the biggest piece of evidence, and the biggest mystery. If the woman in the photograph was Tara, then she had been alive, possibly for months after her disappearance. But if she was alive, why didn't she escape? Why didn't she leave a clue? Why didn't someone recognize her and call the police? Some believed she was being held captive, moved from place to place, never allowed to be seen in public. Others believed the photograph was taken shortly after her abduction, and that she was killed soon after. But then why was the photograph found in Florida 9 months later? Had the abductor traveled there? Or had the photograph been passed from person to person? Was there a network of people involved? The FBI investigated the possibility of a trafficking ring. They looked for similar cases, similar photographs. They found a few, but nothing conclusive, nothing that led to arrests. Another contradiction in the timeline. Based on witness accounts, Tara was last seen riding her bike around 11:30 a.m., but Patty said Tara had left the house around 9:30 a.m. That meant Tara had been riding for 2 hours before she was seen by the witness. But Tara's usual route took about 2 hours to complete. So either the witness was wrong about the time, or Tara had stopped somewhere along the way. The police tried to figure out where she might have stopped. There were no businesses along that stretch of Highway 47. No gas stations, no rest stops, just open road. So where had she been? The police never found out. And finally, there was the question of motive. Why would someone abduct Tara? Was it random? Was she simply in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or was it targeted? Had someone been watching her planning this? If it was random, then the abductor could have been anyone. A drifter, a passing motorist, someone who saw an opportunity and took it. But if it was targeted, then the abductor knew Tara, knew her routine, knew when and where to find her. The police leaned toward the second theory, because of the reports of Tara being followed, because of the strange phone calls, because of the feeling she had that someone was watching her. Someone had been watching her, and on September 1988 they made their move. Over the years, there have been countless false leads in Tara's case. People who claim to have seen her. People who claim to know who abducted to be Tara. Let's talk about a few. In 1992, a woman in California called the police. She said she had been held captive for years by a man who had abducted her from New Mexico. She said her real name was Tara Calico. The police were skeptical, but they investigated. They brought the woman in. They interviewed her. She knew details about Tara's case, things that had been in the news. But when they asked her personal questions, things only Tara would know, she couldn't answer. They ran her fingerprints. She was not Tara Calico. She was a woman with a history of mental illness and false claims. She was charged with filing a false police report. In 1995, a man in Arizona called a tip line. He said he had been hit in New Mexico in 1988. He said he had been picked up by a man in a pickup truck. He said there was a young woman in the truck. She was crying. She looked scared. The man said he didn't think much of it at the time. He thought it was a domestic situation. But years later, after seeing Tara's story on TV, he realized it might have been her. The police interviewed him. They asked for a description of the man driving the truck. He couldn't provide one. It had been too long ago. They asked for a description of the woman. He said she had dark hair. She was young. Not enough to go on. The lead went nowhere. In 1998, a psychic contacted Patty Dole. She said she had visions of Tara. She said Tara was alive, living in Mexico. She had been sold to a cartel. The psychic said she could help find Tara. For a fee. Patty was desperate. She paid the fee. The psychic gave her a location, a small town in Mexico. Patty traveled there. She searched. She found nothing. The psychic had been a fraud. In 2002, a man in prison claimed he had information about Tara's case. He said he had been part of a trafficking ring in the late 1980s. He said they had abducted several young women in New Mexico and sold them across the border. He said he remembered a girl named Tara. The police interviewed him. They asked for details, locations, names of other people involved. He couldn't provide any. He said his memory was fuzzy. The police ran his story against known cases. There was no evidence to support his claims. He was lying, probably trying to negotiate a plea deal on his current charges. The lead was dismissed. Despite all the false leads, the dead ends, and the confusion, the police never stopped investigating. They kept coming back to the same question: who would do this? Who would abduct a young woman in broad daylight, on a public highway, and leave virtually no evidence behind? It had to be someone familiar with the area. Someone who knew Highway 47. Someone who knew when to strike and how to disappear. Over the years, a few names kept resurfacing in the investigation. Let's talk about them. In the months following Tara's disappearance, police received multiple reports about a man who had been seen in the Belen area. He was described as transient, no permanent address. He would show up in town, stay for a few days, then disappear. He was in his late 20s or early 30s. Scruffy and kempt. He drove an old pickup truck. Several people said they had seen him parked along Highway 47 on multiple occasions, just sitting in his truck, watching the road. One woman said she had been jogging along Highway 47 one morning when the man pulled up alongside her. He rolled down his window and he asked, "No, thank you," she said. He didn't leave. He drove slowly beside her for about a quarter mile. She was terrified. Finally, he sped off. When she reported it to police, they took it seriously. They started looking for the man, but they couldn't find him. He had vanished. Then, in early 1989, a man matching his description was arrested in Texas for assault. The police in New Mexico were notified. They traveled to Texas to interview him. His name was David. He was 29 years old. He had a criminal record: petty theft, trespassing, public intoxication. But nothing violent. Nothing that suggested he was capable of abduction. Still, the timing was suspicious. The police asked him about Tara Calico. David said he didn't know who that was. They showed him her photograph. He said he'd never seen her. They asked where he was on September 20th, 1988. He said he didn't remember. That was months ago, he said. How am I supposed to remember? They asked if he had ever been in Belen, New Mexico. He hesitated. Maybe, he said. I've been a lot of places. They asked if he owned a pickup tee. Sold it. When? October. Maybe November last year. Who did you sell it to? Some guy, I don't remember his name. The police were suspicious. They searched for the truck. They couldn't find it. They asked David to take a polygraph test. He refused. The police didn't have enough evidence to charge him. They had to let him go. But they kept his name on file. Remember the man who lived near Highway 47, the one with a history of voyeurism? His name was never publicly released, and according to reports, he remained a person of interest for years. Let's call him John. For the sake of this story, John was in his mid-30s in 1988. He lived alone in a small house just off Highway 47, about 3 miles from where Tara was last seen. He had been arrested twice in the past for peeping into women's windows. He had been given warnings, probation. But he never seemed to learn. Neighbors said he was odd. Quiet, kept to himself. He didn't have a regular job. He did odd jobs here and there. Handyman work, yard maintenance. But mostly he stayed home, and he watched. One neighbor said she had seen him standing at his window with binoculars looking out at the highway. "What are you looking at?" she asked once. He said. But there were no birds. When Tara disappeared, several people in the area immediately thought of John. "He's creepy," one neighbor said. "I wouldn't put it past him." The police interviewed him multiple times. Each time, he denied any involvement. "I didn't do anything," he said. They asked if he knew Tara. "No, did you ever see her riding her bike?" He hesitated. "Maybe. I don't know. A lot of people ride bikes on that road." They asked where he was on the morning of September 20th. "Home." "Can anyone confirm that?" "No, I live alone." They asked if they could search his property. He said no. They came back with a warrant. They searched his house, his garage, his yard. They found binoculars, magazines, photographs of women taken from a distance. But nothing that connected him to Tara. No bike, no clothing, no evidence. They searched his truck. Nothing. They had to let him go. But the police kept watching him. Over the years, he was questioned several more times. Each time he denied involvement. In 1995, he moved away from Belen. No one knows where he went. To this day, some investigators believe he knows something. Based on the witness testimony of the woman who saw 2 men arguing near a truck with something pink in the back, the police created composite sketches. These sketches were circulated widely. Dozens of tips came in. One tip stood out. A woman called and said the sketches looked like 2 men she knew. Brothers. They lived in a rural area outside of Belen. They were known troublemakers, drugs, theft, fighting. They drove a tan pickup truck with a camper shell. The police were immediately interested. They looked into the brothers. Their names were Raymond and Louis. Raymond was 32. They had criminal records. Raymond had been arrested for assault in 1986. Louis had been arrested for burglary in 1987. Both had served short jail sentences. The police brought them in for questioning. Raymond was defensive, hostile. "We didn't do anything," he said. Louis was quieter. Nervous, the police asked where they were on September 20th, 1988. Raymond said they were working. "Where?" "A construction site. In Albuquerque." "Can anyone verify that?" "Our boss." The police contacted the boss. He said he didn't remember. It was over a year ago. The police asked if the brothers had been at work that day. "Probably," the boss said. "They usually were." But he couldn't say for sure. No alibi. The police asked if they could search the brothers' truck. Raymond said no. They came back with a warrant. They searched the truck thoroughly. They found tools, tarps, a crowbar. They found dirt in the truck bed. They tested it. It was consistent with dirt from the area near mile marker 13 on Highway 47. The police were excited. This could be it. They brought the brothers back in. They confronted them with the evidence. "Your truck was near the scene. Nissan found dirt that matches." Raymond shrugged. "We drive on that road all the time," he said. "We work all over. We probably picked up dirt from 100 different places." The detective pressed him. "Did you see Tara Calico that morning?" "I don't know who that is." They showed him her photograph. "Never seen her." They asked Louis. He looked at the photograph. He looked away. "No," he said. But his voice wavered. The police noticed. They separated the brothers, interviewed them individually. They told Louis that Raymond had already confessed. Louis panicked. Did. What did he say? He said you were the one who grabbed her. Louis shouted.
I didn't grab anyone.
The detective leaned in. So you were there. Louis realized his mistake. No, I don't know what you're talking about. He shut down. He asked for a lawyer. The interview ended. The police tried to build a case against the brothers. They had the dirt from the truck. They had Louis's suspicious behavior during the interview. They had the fact that their truck matched the description given by witnesses. But they didn't have enough. No physical evidence linking them to Tara. No bike. No clothing. The district attorney said there wasn't enough to charge them. The brothers were released. But the police kept watching them. Raymond and Luz moved away from New Mexico in 1992. They were never charged in connection with Tara's disappearance. But many people believe they were involved. In 1990, 2 years after Tara disappeared, something happened that reignited the investigation. A second Polaroid photograph was found. This one was discovered in a parking lot in Port St. Joe, Florida, the same town where the first Polaroid had been found. The photograph showed a woman lying on a mattress. She was bound. Her face was partially obscured, but some people thought she looked like Tara. The photograph was sent to the FBI. They analyzed it. They compared it to the first Polaroid. They concluded that the photographs were likely taken by the same person. Same style. Same type of film, same setting. But they couldn't definitively say the woman was Tara. Patty Dole saw the photograph. She wasn't sure. It could be her. I can't tell. The photograph was released to the public. Once again, tips poured in, but none led anywhere. Then in 1991, another discovery. A woman in New Mexico was cleaning out a storage unit she had rented years earlier. She found a duffel bag that wasn't hers. Inside the bag were women's clothing, a pair of sneakers, a Walkman. She didn't recognize any of it. She took the bag to the police. The police examined the items. The sneakers were a women's size 7. Tara wore a size 7. The Walkman was a Sony model. Tara had owned a Sony Walkman. The clothing was consistent with what Tara might have worn. But there was no way to confirm the items belonged to Tara. No name tags, no unique identifiers. The police asked the woman where she had rented the storage unit. Bellin, she said. When 1988. September or October, I think. Who else had access to the unit? Just me. I had the only key. But she admitted that the lock had been broken when she first rented the unit. The management company had replaced it. So someone could have put the bag there before she rented the unit. Or someone could have broken in afterward. The police investigated. They tried to track down who had rented the unit before the woman. The records were incomplete. They hit another dead end. But the discovery of the duffel bag raised new questions. If the items inside belonged to Tara, then someone had taken them from her. Then someone had taken them in a storage unit in Bellin, which meant the abductor was likely local, someone who knew the area, someone who had access to storage units. The police created a list of everyone who had rented a storage unit in Bellin between August and November 1988. There were dozens of names. They cross-referenced the list with their list of suspects. They found a match. Raymond, one of the brothers, he had rented a storage unit in October 1988, just 1 month after Tara disappeared. The police brought Raymond in for questioning again. Why did you rent a storage unit? They asked. I needed somewhere to keep my tools, Raymond said. Did you put anything else in there? Did you put a duffel bag in there?
No.
The police pressed him, but Raymond wouldn't budge. He denied everything. They asked if they could search the storage unit he had rented. He said he didn't rent it anymore. He had given it up years ago. The police tracked down the current renter. They searched the unit. It was empty. Another dead end. By the early 1990s, the investigation into Tara's disappearance had generated multiple theories. Let's break them down. Theory 1. This was the theory the FBI initially favored. Tara was in the wrong place at the wrong time. A stranger saw her riding alone on a deserted highway. He saw an opportunity. He grabbed her. This theory was supported by the fact that there were no clear suspects. No one in Tara's life seemed to have a motive to hurt her. She had no enemies, no stalkers, no angry ex-boyfriends. But this theory had problems. If it was a random abduction, why had there been reports of Tara being followed in the weeks before she disappeared? Random abductions don't usually involve surveillance. And if it was random, why had the abductor taken her bike? Why risk being seen with it? Random abductors usually want to get away as quickly as possible. They don't stop to load a bike into their truck. Theory 2e. This theory suggested that someone had been watching Tara. Someone who knew her routine. Someone who knew she rode alone on Highway 47 every morning. Someone who planned the abduction. This theory was supported by the reports of Tara feeling followed. The strange phone calls to her house. The witness who saw a truck following her. But if someone was targeting Tara, who was it? And why? The police couldn't find anyone with a clear motive, unless the motive was simply sexual. Theory 3. This theory emerged after the Polaroid photographs were found. Some investigators believe that Tara had been abducted by a trafficking ring. She had been taken across state lines. She had been photographed as a trophy or for distribution. She might have been sold. Or she might have been held captive and moved from place to place. This theory explained why she had never been found. If she was part of a trafficking network, she could be anywhere. She could still be alive. Or she could have been killed years ago. The FBI investigated this possibility extensively. They looked for similar cases. They found several young women who disappeared under similar circumstances in the Southwest in the late 1980s. But they couldn't definitively link any of them. Theory 4. Many people in Belen believed the abductor was someone local. Someone who still lived in the area. Someone who had gotten away with it. This theory was supported by the fact that the abduction happened in a very specific location, near mile marker 13. A location where someone could pull off the road without being seen. A location where someone familiar with the area would know to go. And it was supported by the duffel bag found in the storage unit. If that bag did belong to Tara, then someone local had hidden it there. But the police could never prove it. While the investigation continued, Patty Dole was waging her own fight. She refused to give up. She refused to believe Tara was dead. I would know, Patty said in interviews. A mother knows. And I don't feel it. I don't feel that she's gone. Patty dedicated her life to finding Tara. She appeared on every talk show that would have her. She spoke at conferences about missing persons. She lobbied for changes in how police handled disappearance cases. She started a foundation in Tara's name. She never stopped searching. But the years took their toll. Patty's health deteriorated, the stress. The endless waiting. In 2006, Patty Dole passed away. She died without ever knowing what happened to her daughter. At her funeral, people spoke about her strength, her determination, her love for Tara. She never gave up, one friend said. Even when everyone else did, Patty kept fighting. But even after Patty's death, the case didn't die. Tara's family continued the search. Her stepfather, John Dole, took over. He kept the foundation running. He kept the case in the public eye. He kept hoping. In 2008, 20 years after Tara disappeared, a new lead emerged. A woman came forward with a disturbing story. She said that in 1988, she had been dating a man named Frank. Frank was the son of a local sheriff's deputy. She said that one night, shortly after Tara disappeared, Frank had gotten drunk. He started talking. He said he knew what happened to Tara Calico. He said his father had been involved. The woman didn't believe him at the time. She thought he was just talking, making things up. But years later, after seeing a documentary about Tara's case, she started to wonder. What if Frank had been telling the truth? She contacted the police. The police investigated. They looked into Frank's father. His name was Thomas. He had been a deputy with the Valencia County Sheriff's in 1988. He had worked on Tara's case. He had been one of the officers who searched Highway 47. The police interviewed Frank. He denied everything. I don't remember saying that, Frank said. I was drunk all the time back then. I said a lot of stupid things. They asked if his father had ever talked about Tara's case. Sure, Frank said. He worked on it. He talked about it like everyone else did. Did he ever say anything unusual? No, they pressed him. But Frank wouldn't budge. They interviewed Thomas, the former deputy. He was retired now. He was furious. This is ridiculous, Thomas said. I spent months working on that case. I wanted to find that girl as much as anyone. The police asked where he was on the morning of September 20th, 1988. At work. Thomas said. I was on duty that records. Thomas had clocked in at 8 a.m. that day. But Tara had left for her bike ride at 9:30 a.m., and Thomas's shift didn't start until he got to the station. What had he been doing between 8 a.m. and 9:30 a.m.? The records didn't say. Thomas said he didn't remember. That was 20 years ago, he said. The police couldn't build a case. There was no evidence, just the word of a woman recounting something a drunk man had said 2 decades earlier. Thomas was never charged, but the accusation damaged his reputation. He died in 2013, still maintaining his innocence. The Polaroid photograph remains one of the most debated pieces of evidence in the case. Is it Tara? Experts have analyzed the photograph for decades. Some say yes. Some say no. Let's look at the evidence. Arguments that it is Tara. The facial structure matches. The woman in the photograph has a scar on her leg. Tara had a scar on her leg in the same location. The book in the photograph, My Sweet Audrina, was a book Tara had been reading. Patty Dole was certain it was her daughter. Scotland Yard's analysis suggested it was likely Tara. Arguments that it is now Tara. The photograph is low quality. It's hard to make a definitive identification. Many people have scars on their legs. My Sweet Audrina was a popular book. Many people owned it. Some forensic experts said the woman's facial features didn't match Tara's. The FBI officially stated they could not confirm it was Tara. In 2009, the FBI conducted a new analysis of the photograph using advanced technology. They compared it to photographs of Tara. They used facial recognition software. They measured bone structure, facial proportions. Their conclusion: inconclusive. They could not definitively say it was Tara. But they also could not definitively say it wasn't. And what about the boy in the photograph? If it's not Michael Henley, who is it? Some believe it's a child who was also abducted and held captive. Others believe it's not a real photograph at all, that it's staged fake. That theory gained traction in the early 2000s. Some investigators began to believe that the photograph was taken by someone making a hoax, that it had nothing to do with Tara's disappearance, that it was just a cruel prank. But if that's true, then who took the photograph, and why? No one has ever come forward to claim responsibility. As the years passed and the investigation continued, darker theories began to emerge. Theories that suggested Tara's disappearance wasn't the work of a single disturbed individual. Theories that suggested something more organized, more sinister. Let's explore these possibilities. In the early 1990s, investigators began looking into the drug trade in New Mexico. Belen and the surrounding areas were known corridors for drug trafficking. Interstate 25 ran through the region. It was a major route for transporting drugs from Mexico to the northern United States. Highway 47, where Tara disappeared, intersected with several rural roads that were known to be used by drug runners. Some investigators theorized that Tara might have seen something she shouldn't have. Maybe she witnessed a drug deal during one of her bike rides. Maybe she saw a transaction, saw faces, saw license plates, and maybe someone decided she was a liability. The police looked into this possibility. They interviewed known drug dealers in the area. They asked if anyone knew anything about Tara Calico. Most said no, but one dealer arrested on unrelated charges. There were rumors, he said. Back in 88-89, rumors that some girl had seen something, that she'd been taken care of. The police pressed him. What kind of rumors? Just talk. You know how it is. People saying these things. The dealer wouldn't say. He claimed he didn't remember. The police couldn't verify the rumors. But the theory persisted. Another theory that gained traction was that Tara had been the victim of a serial killer. The late 1980s and early 1990s were a peak time for serial killer activity in the United States. Ted Bundy had been executed in 1989, but his crimes had inspired countless imitators. The police looked at known serial killers who had been active in the Southwest during that time period. They looked at unsolved murders, unsolved disappearances. They found several cases that seemed similar to Tara's: young women abducted from roadsides, never found. In Arizona, a woman named Kimberly King had disappeared while jogging in 1991. In Colorado, a woman named Helene Prasinski had been abducted and murdered in 1980. In Texas, multiple women had disappeared from highways throughout the 1980s. Some of these cases were later solved, others remained mysteries, but none were definitively linked to Tara's disappearance. Still, the FBI created a profile of the type of person who might have abducted Tara. The profile: male age 25-40, likely lived in or near Belen, familiar with Highway 47 and the surrounding area, possibly had a job that allowed him to be mobile during the day, likely had a criminal history, possibly involving voyeurism, stalking, or sexual assault, organized, able to plan and execute an abduction without leaving evidence, possibly kept trophies, photographs, items belonging to victims. This profile fit several people the police had already investigated, but it also fit thousands of men in New Mexico. It wasn't enough to narrow down the suspect pool. There was another disturbing possibility that investigators considered. What if Tara's abduction had inspired other crimes? What if someone had read about her case and decided to do the same thing? This theory emerged in the mid-1990s when several other young women disappeared from roadsides in New Mexico and neighboring states. In 1993, a woman named Stephanie Crane disappeared while jogging in Colorado. In 1995, a woman named Brandy Wells disappeared while walking on a highway in Texas. In 1997, a woman named Kristen Modafferi disappeared in San Francisco. While the circumstances were different, some investigators wondered if there was a connection. The police looked for patterns. They compared the cases. But the similarities were superficial: different methods, different locations, different outcomes. Most of these cases were determined to be unrelated, but the fear remained that Tara's case had become a blueprint, a how-to guide for would-be abductors. As technology advanced, so did the investigation into Tara's disappearance. In the 2000s, the Valencia County Sheriff's Office began using new forensic techniques to re-examine the evidence. They sent the cassette found near mile marker 13 for new DNA testing. The original testing in 1988 had found nothing, but DNA technology had improved dramatically. The new tests found trace DNA, but it was degraded, contaminated. It couldn't be matched to anyone in the database. Still, it was something. The DNA profile was entered into CODIS, the FBI's national DNA database. If the person who left that DNA ever committed another crime and had their DNA collected, there would be a match. But as of today, there has been no match. The police also used new technology to enhance the Polaroid photographs. They brought in experts from the FBI's forensic imaging unit. These experts used software to enhance the images, to clarify details, to analyze shadows and lighting. They were looking for anything that might identify where the photographs were taken. The wood paneling in the background, a window, the curtain. They compared the images to known locations: hotels, motels, campers, trailers. They found several possible matches. The photographs remained a mystery. In 2013, the Valencia County Sheriff's Office announced they were reopening Tara's case. They assembled a new task force. They brought in fresh eyes, detectives who hadn't been involved in the original investigation. They began re-interviewing witnesses. Many of the original witnesses were now in their 50s and 60s. Their memories had faded. Some had died. But a few had new information. One witness, a man who had been a teenager in 1988, came forward. He said that on the morning Tara disappeared, he had been driving on Highway 47 with his father. They had seen a truck pulled over on the side of the road. A man was standing at the back of the truck. He was doing something. The witness couldn't see what. The witness's father had slowed down. "You need help," he had called out. The man waved him off. "I'm fine," he shouted. They drove on. The witness said he had never thought much about it until he saw a news report about the case being reopened. Now he wondered if that man had been Tara's abductor. The police asked for a description of the man. He was white, maybe 30s or 40s. I don't remember much else. What it was like: colored, tan maybe, or beige. I think so. I'm not sure. It matched the descriptions from other witnesses. But once again, it wasn't enough to identify a suspect. The reopening of the case brought new witnesses out of the woodwork. People who had been afraid to come forward before. People who didn't think their information was important. People who had only recently made connections. A woman named Gloria contacted the police in 2014. She said that in 1988 she had been working as a waitress at a diner in Belen. About a week after Tara disappeared, a man came into the diner. He was agitated. Nervous, he ordered coffee but barely touched it. Gloria said she tried to make small talk with him. "You okay?" she asked. The man looked at her. "I did something bad," he said. Gloria was taken aback. "What do you mean?" The man didn't answer. He put money on the table and left. Gloria said she didn't think much of it at the time. She assumed he was talking about something minor. A fight with his wife. A problem at work. But years later, after seeing a documentary about Tara's case, she started to wonder. What if the man had been talking about Tara? The police asked Gloria to describe the man. He was white, maybe late 30s. Brown hair, average height. He had a scar on his cheek. Right here, she pointed to her left cheek. Did he say anything else? No, he just left. The police asked if she would be willing to work with a sketch artist. Gloria agreed. A sketch was created. It was distributed to the public. Several people called in, saying the sketch looked like someone they knew, but none of the tips led to an arrest. A man named Eddie came forward in 2015. He said that in September 1988, he had been working at a truck stop just outside of Belen. He remembered a particular day because something strange had happened. A man pulled up in a pickup truck. The truck had a camper shell. The man went inside to pay for gas. While he was inside, Eddie noticed something in the back of the truck. Through the window of the camper shell, he saw what looked like a pink bike. Eddie thought it was odd. The truck looked like a work truck. Not the kind of vehicle you'd expect to see with a bike in it. But he didn't say anything. The man paid and left. Eddie said he didn't think about it again until he saw the news about Tara's case being reopened. Then he remembered the pink bike. The police asked Eddie to describe the man. White guy, maybe 30s. Dark hair, he was wearing a baseball cap. What about the truck? It was tan or beige Ford, I think. Did you see the license plate?
No.
What time of day was this? Afternoon. Maybe 2 or 3 o'clock. The timing was interesting. Tara had disappeared sometime between 9:30 a.m. and noon. If this man had her bike at 20:30 p.m., it meant he had kept it for several hours. Why? The police theorized that he might have been waiting, watching the news, trying to figure out what to do with the bike. Or maybe he had taken Tara somewhere and was now disposing of evidence. Either way, it was a significant lead. But without a license plate or a clear identification of the man, it was another dead end. Even with new witnesses and new technology, there were still pieces of the puzzle that didn't fit. Let's look at some of the ongoing contradictions. Based on witness accounts, Tara left her house around 9:30 a.m. She was seen riding her bike around 11:30 a.m. by the witness who saw the truck following her. That's 2 hours. Tara's usual route took about 2 hours to complete, so the math adds up. But here's the problem: another witness said they saw Tara's bike lying in the ditch around noon. If Tara was abducted at 11:30 a.m., how did her bike up in the ditch 30 minutes later? Did the abductor take Tara and leave the bike? That seems unlikely. Did the abductor take both Tara and the bike, then come back later to leave the bike in the ditch? Also unlikely. Why risk being seen twice? The police tried to reconcile this. They theorized that maybe the witness who saw the bike at noon was wrong about the time. Or maybe they saw a different bike. Or maybe the bike was planted there later as a diversion. But none of these explanations felt right. The cassette tape found near mile marker 13 was tested for fingerprints. None were found. But Tara would have handled the tape. Her fingerprints should have been on it. Unless the abductor wiped it clean. But why? If the abductor was trying to get rid of evidence, why not just take the tape with him? Why leave it at the scene? Some investigators theorized that the tape was dry accidentally during the abduction. Maybe Tara was struggling. Maybe the Walkman was knocked out of her hands. Maybe the tape fell out. But if that's the case, there should have been other signs of the struggle. Scuff marks on the ground. Torn clothing. Blood. There were none. If the woman in the Polaroid is Tara, then she was alive at least 9 months after her disappearance. The photograph was found in June 1989. Tara disappeared in September 1988. That's 9 months. If she was held captive for 9 months, where was she? And why has she never been found? The FBI investigated the possibility that she was moved frequently, from one location to another, across state lines. That would explain why she was never seen. But it also raises questions: who had the resources to do that? Who had the connections? It would take money, safe houses, a network of people willing to help. This wasn't the work of a single disturbed individual. This was organized. But if it was organized, why hasn't anyone ever talked? Criminal networks always have weak links. People who get arrested and make deals. People who get scared and confess. In 36 years, no one has come forward with credible information about a trafficking network involving Tara. Either everyone involved is dead, or the Polaroid isn't Tara at all. In the last decade, two names have emerged as the most likely suspects in Tara's disappearance. These are the people that current investigators believe are most responsible. Let's talk about them. In 2016, a retired sheriff's deputy came forward with new information. He said that back in 1988, shortly after Tara disappeared, he had interviewed a man who worked on a ranch near Highway 47. The man's name was Lawrence. Lawrence was in his early 30s. He lived in a small trailer on the ranch property. He was a loner, kept to himself. The deputy had interviewed him as part of the routine canvassing of the area. Lawrence had been nervous during the interview, evasive. When asked if he had seen anything unusual on the morning of September 20th, Lawrence said no. But the deputy noticed said thing. Lawrence kept looking over his shoulder, toward his trailer. The deputy asked if he could look inside the trailer. Lawrence said no. The deputy didn't have probable cause for a warrant, so he left. But he wrote up a report. The report was filed away, lost in the shuffle of the massive investigation. Now, 28 years later, the retired deputy remembered. He contacted the current investigators. They looked into Lawrence. It turned out Lawrence had a criminal record. In 1985, he had been arrested for assault in Texas. He had grabbed a woman in a parking lot, tried to force her into his car. She fought back, screamed. He ran. He was caught. Convicted, years. He was released in 1987. 1 year before Tara disappeared, the investigators tried to locate Lawrence. He was living in Arizona. They brought him in for questioning. Lawrence was now in his 60s, weathered, tired. He denied any involvement in Tara's disappearance. "I already talked to the police back then," he said. "I didn't know anything." The investigators pressed him. "Why were you nervous during that interview?" "I wasn't nervous. The deputy said you were. He said you wouldn't let him search your trailer." "What wouldn't have to?" "Nothing. I just didn't want cops going through my stuff." The investigators asked where he was on the morning of September 20, 1988. "I was at work." "Can anyone confirm that?" "The owner. But he's dead now. No alibi." The investigators asked if Lawrence had ever owned a pickup truck. "Yeah. Back then I had a Ford Ranger. Tan." The investigators looked at each other. Lawrence hesitated. Lawrence hesitated. The investigators asked what happened to the truck. "Sold it." "When?" "I don't remember. 89. Maybe? 90?
Who did you sell it to? Some guy, I don't remember his name.
The investigators asked if they could search Lawrence's current residence. He said no. They obtained a warrant. They searched his house in Arizona. They didn't find anything connecting him to Tara. But they found something else. Hundreds of photographs of women, taken from a distance. Women jogging, women at gas stations, women in parking lots. Lawrence had been watching women. The investigators confronted him. "What are these?" "Just pictures. Of women you don't know." "I like taking pictures." The investigators asked if any of the women in the photographs were Tara Calico. They went through them. One by one. None of them were Tara. But they found something. One photograph taken in New Mexico showed a woman on a bike. But the photograph had been taken on Highway 47 in 1988. The metadata on the photograph confirmed it. Lawrence had been on Highway 47 in 1988. Around the same time Tara disappeared, the investigators tried to build a case. They had Lawrence's criminal history, his truck which matched witness descriptions, his presence on Highway 47 in 1988, his suspicious behavior during the original interview, his collection of photographs of women. But they didn't have physical evidence linking him to Tara, a witness who could place him at the scene, a confession. The district attorney said there wasn't enough to charge him. Lawrence remains a person of interest. but he has never been arrested in connection with Tara's disappearance. Remember Thomas, the sheriff's deputy whose son claimed he was involved? After Thomas died in 2013, new information came to light. A woman who'd been Thomas's neighbor in the 1990s came forward. She said that Thomas had once made a strange comment to her. They had been talking about Tara's case. It was in the news again because of some anniversary. The woman had said, "I hope they find out what happened to that poor girl." Thomas had looked at her. "Some things are better left buried," he said. The woman thought it was an odd thing to say, but she didn't pursue it. Now, years later, she wondered if it had been a confession. The investigators looked into Thomas's background. Thomas had been a deputy for 20 years. He had a clean record. He had been well liked. But they found something interesting. In 1987, a year before Tara disappeared, a woman had filed a complaint against Thomas. She said he had pulled her over for a traffic violation. He had asked her to step out of the car. He had stood too close to her, made her uncomfortable. She said he had asked for her phone number. When she refused, he gave her a ticket. She filed a complaint with the sheriff's office. The complaint was investigated. Thomas denied any wrongdoing. The woman couldn't prove anything. The complaint was dismissed, but it was noted in his file. The investigators also found that Thomas had been one of the first deputies to arrive at mile marker 13 after Tara's bike was reported missing. He had been part of the search team, which meant he had access to the scene. If Thomas had been involved in Tara's disappearance, he could have contaminated evidence. He could have planted evidence. He could have directed the investigation away from himself. But again, there was no proof, just suspicions. Thomas was dead. He couldn't be questioned. He couldn't be charged. The case against him would never be resolved. By 2017, Tara Calico's case had been officially designated as a cold case. Nearly 30 years had passed since her disappearance. Most of the original investigators had retired or died. The evidence had been stored in boxes for decades. The witnesses had scattered across the country. But the Valencia County Sheriff's Office wasn't ready to give up. They assigned the case to their newly formed cold case unit. Detective Maria Santos was put in charge. She was young, energetic, determined. She had grown up in New Mexico. She had heard about Tara's case her whole life. Now, she had a chance to start from the beginning. She pulled every file, every report, every photograph. She read through thousands of pages of interviews, witness statements, and investigative notes. She created a timeline, a massive chart that covered an entire wall of her office. Every known fact, every witness sighting, every piece of evidence. She was looking for patterns, connections, things that previous investigators might have missed. And she found something. There was a detail in one of the witness statements that had been overlooked. The witness who saw two men arguing near a truck with something pink in the back. She had said the men were arguing, but no one had ever asked what they were arguing about. Detective Santos tracked down the witness. She was in her 70s now, living in Texas. Detective Santos flew out to interview her. "Can you remember anything about what the men were arguing about?" Santos asked. The woman closed her eyes. "Tried to remember, it was so long ago," she said. "But I remember. One of them was angry. He kept saying something like, 'You weren't supposed to do that.' Or 'This wasn't the plan.' Something like that." "And what did the other one say?" "Was trying to calm him down. He kept saying, 'It's fine. We'll take care of it.'" This was new information. It suggested that whatever had happened to Tara, it might not have been entirely planned. Maybe one of the men had acted impulsively. Maybe the abduction had gone wrong. Maybe Tara had been hurt or killed by accident. Detective Santos filed this information away. It might be important later. In 2018, something significant happened. The Valencia County Sheriff's Office partnered with a private DNA laboratory that specialized in genetic genealogy. This was the same technology that had been used to catch the Golden State Killer. The idea was simple: take the DNA found on the cassette tape, upload it to genealogy databases, and look for familial matches. Even if the person who left the DNA wasn't in the database, their relatives might be, and those relatives could lead investigators to the suspect. It was a long shot. The DNA from the cassette tape was degraded, contaminated, but the lab said they would try. They extracted what they could. amplified it. They created a genetic profile. They uploaded it to Genetic, a public genealogy database, and they waited weeks past, then months. Detective Santos was beginning to lose hope. And then, in August 2018, they got a hit, a familial match. The DNA on the cassette tape was someone in the database, a woman named Carol. Carol had uploaded her DNA to GEDmatch to find her birth parents. She had been adopted as a child. She had no idea she was about to become a key witness in a missing persons case. The investigators contacted Carol. They explained the situation. Carol was shocked. "I don't know anything about this case," she said. "I've never even been to New Mexico." The investigators explained that they weren't accusing her of anything. They were looking for her relatives. Specifically, they were looking for a male relative who would have been in New Mexico in 1988. Carol agreed to help. She provided the investigators with her family tree. The investigators began working through it. One had died in 2005. One was living in Oregon. One was living in Arizona. The investigators looked into the brother in Arizona. His name was David, and he had a criminal record. David was 62 years old. In 1988, he would have been 32. He had been arrested multiple times over the years. Assault, drug possession. He had served several short jail sentences. But he had never been investigated for anything like abduction or murder. The investigators dug deeper. They found that David had lived in New Mexico in the 1980s. Specifically, he had lived in Albuquerque, which was less than 40 miles from Belen. The investigators looked at old DMV records. David had owned a pickup truck in 1988, a Ford Ranger, tan. Everything was lining up. Detective Santos flew to Arizona. She brought 2 other investigators with her. They knocked on David's door. An older man answered. He looked tired, worn down by life. "David," Detective Santos asked. "Yeah." She showed him her badge. "I'm Detective Santos with the Valencia County Sheriff's Office in New Mexico. We need to talk to you about Tara Calico." David's face went pale. "I don't know who that is," he said. "Can we come in?" David hesitated. Then he stepped aside. They sat in his living room. Detective Santos explained that they had DNA evidence linking him to the scene of Tara's disappearance. "Your DNA was found on a cassette tape near where she was last seen," Santos said. David shook his head. "That's impossible. I've never been to Belen. We have records showing you lived in Albuquerque in 1988. So what? Lots of people lived in Albuquerque. Did you ever drive on Highway 47? I don't remember. It was 30 years ago. Did you own a tan Ford Ranger?" David paused. "Yeah, I had a truck like that." "What happened to it?" "I sold it." "Who did you sell it to?" "I don't remember." Detective Santos leaned forward. "David, we have your DNA at the scene. We know you were there. We know you had a truck that matches witness descriptions. We need you to tell us the truth." David looked down at his hands. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that changed everything. "I didn't kill her," David said. "But I know who did." Detective Santos felt her heart racing. "Who?" she asked. David looked up. His eyes were wet. "My brother," he said. "Raymond. The same Raymond who had been investigated back in 1988. The same Raymond who had rented a storage unit in Belen. The same Raymond who had been questioned with his brother Louis about the truck with something pink in the back." Detective Santos's mind was spinning. "Your brother Raymond. Where'd?" David said. "He died in 2003. "Of course he did. Tell me what happened," Detective Santos said. David took a deep breath. "Rahman and I, we were doing some work in Belen back in '88. Construction. Off-the-book stuff. Cash jobs. We were driving on Highway 47 one morning. September, I don't remember the exact date. Raymond was driving. I was in the passenger seat. We saw this girl on a bike. Pretty girl, long dark hair. Raymond had a thing. He liked young girls. Always had. He slowed down. Started driving next to her. I told him to leave her alone. I said, 'Come on, man, we got work to do.' But he wouldn't listen. He sped up a little. Then he pulled over. He got out of the truck. I stayed in the passenger seat. I didn't know what he was doing. He walked back toward the girl. I could see them talking. Or he was talking." She looked scared. "Then he grabbed her." David stopped. His voice. "I should have stopped him. I should have done something. But I just sat there. He dragged her to the truck. She was screaming. Finally threw her in the back. threw her bike in after her. Then he got in the truck and drove. I said, "What the hell are you doing?" He said, "Shut up." He drove to this place he knew. An old abandoned barn out in the desert. He pulled the truck inside. He told me to help him tie her up. I said no. He pulled a knife. Said if I didn't help, he'd kill me too, so I helped. We tied her hands, tied her feet, begging us to let her go. Raymond just laughed. He said we'd keep her for a while. Have some fun. I said I wanted no part of it. He said I was already part of it. I was there, I helped. If I told anyone, I'd go to prison too. So I kept quiet. Detective Santos could barely breathe. "What happened to Tara?" she asked. David shook his head. "I don't know. Raymond wouldn't let me near her after that first day. He kept her in that barn. He'd go out there every day, or food, water. I asked him what he was doing. He said he was figuring out what to do with her. I told him he had to let her go. He said he couldn't. She'd seen our faces. I said we should just leave, go to another state. But he wouldn't. This went on for maybe a week, maybe two. Then one day Raymond came back and he looked different. I asked him where the girl was. He said she was gone. I asked what he meant. He said, "She's dead." I took care of it. I lost it. I started yelling at him. He grabbed me. Told me if I ever said anything, he'd make sure I went down for it too. He said we were both guilty. We were both going to hell. And then he left. I never saw the girl again. I never went back to that barn. And I never asked Raymond what he did with her body. Detective Santos was trying to stay calm. "Where is this barn?" she asked. David shook his head. "I don't know. It was in the middle of nowhere. Off some dirt road. I couldn't find it now if I tried." "Try." David closed his eyes. "It was south of Belen, I think. Maybe 10-15 miles, near some old power lines. The barn was red, or it used to be red. The paint was peeling. There was a windmill nearby broken, not spinning anymore. That's all I remember." Detective Santos made notes. "Did Ramon say anything else about what he did with Tara's body?" "No, he wouldn't talk about it. Anytime I brought it up, he'd shut me down. After a while, I stopped asking. We went our separate ways in 1989. I moved to Texas. He stayed in New Mexico for a while, then barely spoke after that. When he died in 2003, I thought it was over. I thought I could forget about it. But I couldn't. It's haunted me every day for 30 years. Detective Santos asked David if he would be willing to make an official statement. David agreed. He signed a confession. He admitted to being an accessory to kidnapping. He provided every detail he could remember. The investigators recorded everything. But there was a problem. David's confession was uncorroborated. Raymond was dead. He couldn't confirm or deny the story. There were no other witnesses, and without Tara's body, there was no physical evidence of murder. The district attorney reviewed the case. He said he could charge David as an accessory to kidnapping, but he couldn't charge him with murder. And even the kidnapping charge was shaky. It was David's word against a dead man's. A defense attorney would tear it apart. Still, the investigators moved forward. David was arrested and charged with accessory to kidnapping. He was extradited to New Mexico. He awaited trial. While David sat in jail, Detective Santos launched a massive search operation. She was looking for the barn he had described, Red Barn, south of Belen, near power lines, near a broken windmill. She pulled out maps, satellite images, county records. She identified every barn within a 20-mile radius of Belen. There were dozens. She organized search teams, volunteers, police officers, search and rescue dogs. They went to every barn. They searched for any sign that Tara had been there, bones, clothing, anything. After 3 weeks of searching, they found something. A barn about 12 miles south of Belen. It was on an abandoned property. The land had been foreclosed on years ago. The barn was old, falling apart, and it had once been painted red. Near the barn was a broken windmill, and power lines ran across the property. It matched David's description. The search team entered the barn carefully. It was full of old farming equipment, rusted tools, rotting wood. They searched every inch. They brought in cadaver dogs. The dogs alerted in one corner of the barn. The investigators dug. 6 feet down, they found something, bones, human bones. The remains were carefully excavated. They were sent to the state medical examiner's office. The medical examiner conducted a full analysis. The bones belonged to a young woman. age at approximately 18-22 years old, to 5'8". The measurements were consistent with Tara Calico, but they needed DNA confirmation. The bones were sent to a lab for DNA testing. The lab compared the DNA from the bones to DNA from Tara's family. Specifically, they used DNA from Tara's maternal relatives. Patty Dole had died years earlier, but her sister was still alive. She provided a DNA sample. The lab worked for weeks, and then finally they had an answer. The bones were not Tara Calico. Detective Santos was devastated. The DNA didn't match. The bones belonged to someone else. Another young woman, another victim. The medical examiner estimated the bones had been there for at least 20 years, which meant this woman had died sometime in the 1990s or early 2000s. The remains were entered into the National Missing Persons database. They were compared to other missing persons cases. There was a match. The bones belonged to a woman named Jennifer Cruz. She had disappeared from Albuquerque in 1994. She had been 20 years old. Her case had never been solved. The investigators contacted Jennifer's family. They were able to bring Jennifer home, to give her a proper burial. It was a small victory, but it wasn't the victory they were hoping for. Tara Calico was still missing. In 2019, David went to trial. He was charged with accessory to kidnapping. The prosecution presented their case. They had David's confession. They had the DNA evidence linking him to the scene. They had his criminal history. They had the testimony of witnesses who saw a truck matching his description. The defense argued that David's confession was coerced, that he was a troubled man with a history of drug use and mental health issues, that his memory of events from 30 years ago couldn't be trusted, that there was no physical evidence linking him to Tara, no body, no clothing, just a contaminated DNA sample on a cassette tape. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Tara's family sat in the courtroom every day. Her stepfather, John Dole, testified. He talked about Tara, about who she was, what she meant to her family. He begged the jury to find David guilty. This man knows what happened to Tara. John said, tears streaming down his face. He knows where she is, and he needs to pay for what he did. The jury deliberated for 2 days. They came back with a verdict. Guilty. David was convicted of accessory to kidnapping. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. But the conviction didn't bring closure. Because David's story didn't explain everything. It didn't explain the Polaroid photographs. If Raymond killed Tara within a week or two of abducting her, as David claimed, then how did the Polaroid photograph surface 9 months later? Who took that photograph? Where was it taken? And was the woman in the photograph really Tara? These questions remained unanswered. After David's conviction, Detective Santos turned her attention back to the Polaroid photographs. She was convinced they're the key to understanding what really happened. She contacted the FBI. She asked them to conduct a new analysis using the most advanced technology available. The FBI agreed. They used artificial intelligence, machine learning, facial recognition software. They compared the woman in the Polaroid to every photograph of Tara Calico that existed. They analyzed bone structure, facial proportions, ear shape, and features. They worked for months. And in 2020, they released their findings. The FBI concluded with 87% certainty that the woman in the Polaroid photograph was now Tara Calico. The news sent shockwaves through the true crime community. For 30 years, people had believed that photograph was Tara. Her mother had been certain. Investigators had been certain. But the science said otherwise. So who was the woman in the photograph? And where was Tara Calico? After the FBI's announcement, people began to question David's confession. What if he had lied? What if he had been covering for someone else? Or what if he had been confused, misremembering events from 30 years ago? What if Tara's abduction had nothing to do with David and Renan at all? These questions led to a new wave of conspiracy theories. Theory 1. Some people believed that David had been coerced into confessing, that the police needed a suspect and David was vulnerable. He had a criminal record, he had no alibi, his DNA was at the scene, but maybe that DNA got there innocently. Maybe David had driven on Highway 47 that day and stopped to look at a map. Maybe he dropped the cassette tape without realizing it. Maybe the whole confession was fabricated to close the case. Theory 2. Others believe that Raymond had nothing to do with Tara's disappearance. that David had blamed his dead brother because Raymond couldn't defend himself, that the real abductor was still out there, still free. Theory. Some investigators still believed that Tara had been taken by a trafficking ring, that David and Raymond were just small-time criminals who happened to be in the area, that the real abductors were organized, professional, that Tara had been sold across the border, that she might still be alive somewhere, being held against her will. This theory was supported by the Polaroid photographs. Even if the FBI said the woman wasn't Tara, some people still believed, science isn't perfect. They said the FBI could be wrong. Theory way forte. And then there were those who believed that someone in law enforcement had been involved, that the investigation had been sabotaged from the beginning, that evidence had been hidden or destroyed, that the real suspect was a cop or a sheriff or someone with connections. That's why the case had never been solved. That's why every lead had gone nowhere, because someone on the inside was protecting the abductor. This theory pointed to Thomas, the sheriff's deputy. His sons claimed that his father was involved. Thomas's suspicious behavior, his access to the crime scene, his ability to manipulate evidence. Maybe David was telling the truth about Raymond, but maybe Raymond didn't act alone. Maybe Thomas helped. Maybe there were others. Even after David's conviction, the search for Tara Calico didn't end. Her family refused to give up. John Doyle, her stepfather, continued to lead the effort. He was in his 80s now. His health was failing, but he was determined. "I made a promise to Patty," he said in interviews. "I promised her I would find Tara, and I'm going to keep that promise." He organized annual searches. Every September, on the anniversary of Tara's disappearance, volunteers would gather in Belen. They would walk the desert, search abandoned buildings, look for any sign of Tara. They never found anything, but they never stopped trying. Detective Santos also refused to give up. She kept the case open, kept investigating. She followed every new lead, no matter how unlikely. In 2021, a psychic contacted her. The psychic said she had visions of Tara. She said Tara was buried near water, near a bridge, in a place where the wind always blows. Detective Santos was skeptical, but she had learned over the years that sometimes you have to follow every possibility. She organized a search near the Rio Grande. They searched along the riverbank, near bridges, in areas where the wind whipped across the water. They found nothing. In 2022, another tip came in. A man called the police. He said his father had worked construction in New Mexico in the 1980s. Before he died, the father had confessed something to his son. He said he had helped bury a body in the desert near Belen. He said it was a young woman. He said he had been paid to do it, paid to keep quiet. The son said he didn't have specific details. His father had been delirious, dying. His memory was fragmentary. But he mentioned a location. Near the old railroad tracks, the father had said. Near where the tracks crossed the highway. Detective Santos knew exactly where that was. It was less than 5 miles from where Tara had disappeared. She organized another search. Ground-penetrating radar. A full forensic team. They searched for weeks. They found old bottles, animal bones, but no human remains. No sign of Tara. And over the decades, Tara Calico's case has become more than just a missing profession. It has become a symbol. A reminder of how fragile safety is. A reminder that evil can strike anywhere at any time. In Belen, New Mexico, Tara's disappearance changed everything. Parents became more protective. People stopped letting their children ride bikes alone. Women stopped jogging on isolated roads. The town lost its innocence. The Tara's case also inspired change. In the years following her disappearance, New Mexico passed new laws. The Tara Calico Missing Persons Act was enacted in 1990. The law required police to immediately investigate missing persons reports. Before this law, police often waited 24 hours before taking action. Those 24 hours could mean the difference between life and death. The law also established a statewide missing persons database. It created protocols for coordinating searches across jurisdictions. It mandated training for law enforcement on handling missing persons cases. Tara's disappearance saved lives. Because of the changes it inspired, other missing people were found faster. Other families got closure. Tara's case also influenced national policy. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children used her case as an example of why rapid response is critical. The FBI incorporated lessons from Tara's case into their training programs. Her story was featured in documentaries, podcasts, books. It became one of the most well-known unsolved cases in American history. Not because it was the most brutal, not because it was the most mysterious, but because it was so relatable. Tara was an ordinary girl, doing an ordinary thing, and she vanished. It could happen to anyone. That's what made it so terrifying, and so important. As of 2024, 36 years after her disappearance, Tara Calico has still not been found. Her case remains open, and there are several theories about what happened to her. Let's examine each one. Theory Win-Win. This is the theory that David's confession supports. According to David, his brother Raymond abducted Tara, held her for 1 to 2 weeks, then killed her. Raymond allegedly disposed of her body somewhere in the New Mexico desert. The body has never been found because the desert is vast, remote, forgiving. There are thousands of square miles of empty land. Tara could be anywhere. This theory is supported by David's confession, the DNA evidence placing David at the scene, the lack of any credible sightings of Tara after September 1988, the fact that Raymond is now dead and cannot contradict the story. This theory is contradicted by the Polaroid photograph found 9 months later, the lack of physical evidence connecting Raymond to the crime, the fact that David could be lying to protect someone else or himself. Theory 2. Some investigators still believe Tara was taken by a trafficking ring, that she was moved across state lines, that she was held captive possibly for years, that she may have been sold, repeatedly, that she might have eventually been killed and buried in an unmarked grave far from New Mexico. This theory is supported by reports in the late 1980s of trafficking rings operating in the Southwest, the Polaroid photographs which suggest she may have been held captive, the organized nature of the abduction, reports of women matching Tara's description being seen in Texas and Mexico. This theory is contradicted by the FBI's conclusion that the Polaroid is likely not Tara, the lack of any credible evidence of a trafficking ring in Belen at that time, the fact that traffickers usually target vulnerable populations, not middle-class college students. Theory A3. This theory suggests that Thomas, the sheriff's deputy, was involved, that he may have acted alone or with accomplices, that he used his position to cover up the crime, that he manipulated the investigation to protect himself. This theory is supported by the claim made by Thomas's son that his father was involved, Thomas's suspicious comment about some things are better left buried, the 1987 complaint filed against Thomas by a woman who felt he behaved inappropriately during a traffic stop, Thomas's access to the crime scene and the investigation, the fact that the investigation seemed to hit dead ends repeatedly, possibly due to sabotage. This theory is contradicted by the lack of any physical evidence connecting Thomas to the crime, the fact that Thomas is now dead and cannot be questioned, the fact that David's confession doesn't mention Thomas, the possibility that Thomas's son was lying or mistaken. Theory A4. This is the theory that Tara's family clung to for years, that she was taken and is being held somewhere against her will, that she has been brainwashed, traumatized and able to escape, that one day she will be found. This theory is supported by the Polaroid photograph which some people still believe shows Tara alive months after her disappearance. Reports of women matching Tara's description being seen in various locations over the years, cases like J.C. Dugard and Elizabeth Smart, who were held captive for years before being found. The fact that Tara's body has never been found. This theory is contradicted by the FBI's analysis suggesting the Polaroid is not Tara, the lack of any credible sighting in over 30 years, the statistical improbability of someone surviving captivity for this long, David's confession that Raymond killed Tara shortly after abduction. Based on all the evidence, what is the most likely scenario? Here's what Detective Santos believes. Tara was abducted by 2 men on the morning of September 20, 1988. These men were likely David and Ramon, as David confessed. Or they were David and someone else, possibly Thomas or another accomplice. Tara was taken to an isolated location, possibly the Red Barn, possibly somewhere else. She was held captive for a period of time, days, maybe weeks. During this time, she was likely assaulted, terrorized. At some point, her captors decided they couldn't let her go. She had seen their faces. She could identify them, so they killed her. They buried her body somewhere in the desert. They disposed of her bike and her belongings. They went on with their lives, and they got away with it for 36 years. As for the Polaroid photograph, Detective Santos believes it was a cruel hoax. Someone found a photograph of two bound people. They saw the publicity around Tara's case. They decided to create a sensation. They planted the photograph in Florida. And it worked. It derailed the investigation, created false hope, caused immense pain to Tara's family. But it was never really Tara. The FBI's analysis confirmed it. Even with David's conviction, there are still so many unanswered questions. Where is Tara's body? David claimed Raman killed her, but he says he doesn't know where Raymond buried her. The searches have turned up nothing. Is Tara still out there, somewhere in the New Mexico desert, waiting to be found? Or did Raymond dispose of her body in a way that ensures she'll never be found? Did he burn her, bury her in concrete, throw her in a body of water? These questions haunt the investigators. What happened to Tara's bike? Multiple witnesses reported seeing a pink bike. One said they saw it in the ditch. Another said they saw it in the back of a truck, but the bike was never found. Sell it, hide it, or is it still out there somewhere, rusted and forgotten? Who took the Polaroid photograph? If it's not Tara, who is the woman in the photograph? Who is the boy? Why was the photograph taken? Who planted it in Florida, and why? These questions may never be answered with Thomas really involved. His son claimed he was. Thomas made suspicious comments. He had access to the investigation, but there's no proof. Is it possible that David's confession was only part of the truth? That Raymond had help from someone in law enforcement? That the cover-up went deeper than anyone realized? We may never know. Are there other victims? Jennifer Cruz's remains were found in the same barn that David described. She disappeared in 1994, 6 years after Tara. Is it possible that Raymond killed other women? That there are more bodies out there? The police investigated this possibility. They looked at unsolved missing persons cases from the 1980s and 1990s. They found several that seemed similar to Tara's, but they couldn't definitively link any of them to Raman. Still, the question remains, how many victims were there? In 2023, John Doe passed away. He was 91 years old. He died without ever knowing what happened to his stepdaughter. At his funeral, people spoke about his devotion, his tireless search for Tara, his refusal to give up, even when everyone else had moved on. John loved Tara like she was his own daughter, one friend said. He spent the last 35 years of his life trying to bring her home. He never stopped believing we would find her. John was buried next to Patty. Together they rest. Together they wait for the day when Tara will finally be found. But even without John, the search continues. Tara's extended family has taken up the cause. Her cousins, her friends, people who never even met her but were moved by her nice searches. They raise awareness. They refuse to let Tara be forgotten. Detective Santos is still working the case. She's older now, grayer, but she's still determined. I won't retire until we find her, Santos said in a recent interview. Tara deserves to be brought home. Her family deserves closure, and I'm going to make sure that happens. Santos has a new lead she's following. She won't discuss the details, but she says it's promising. There's always hope, she said. Always. You can never give up on these cases. Because the moment you give up, that's the moment you fail the victim. Tara Calico's disappearance taught us many lessons. About vigilance. About the importance of never giving up. Here are some of the most important takeaways. Lesson B1. Tara felt like she was being followed. She told her mother. But she didn't change her routine. She didn't take the threat seriously enough. If you feel like you're being followed, trust that instinct. Change your route. Go to a public place. Call for help. Don't ignore it. Don't assume it's nothing. Because sometimes it's everything. Before Tara's case, many police departments had a 24-hour waiting period before investigating missing persons. That policy has now changed in most places. But in 1988, those crucial first hours were lost. By the time the police started searching, Tara's trail had gone cold. Now we know that immediate action can save lives. If someone you love goes missing, report it immediately. Don't wait, every minute counts. Lesson 3. If David's confession is true, then Raymond was an ordinary man. A construction worker. Someone's son. He lived in the community. He worked alongside other people. He seemed normal, but he was capable of monstrous acts. This is a reminder that predators don't always look like monsters. They look like your neighbor, your coworker, your friend. Stay vigilant. Protect yourself. Don't assume that because someone seems nice they are safe. Lesson in 4E: never give up. Patty Dole never gave up. John Dole never gave up. Detective Santos will never give up. Even after 36 years, people are still searching for Tara, still hoping for answers. This persistence is important, because the moment we give up on the missing, we allow their abductors to win. We owe it to the victims to keep fighting, to keep searching, to keep hoping. As of 2024, the Tara Calico case is still open. David is serving his 20-year sentence for accessory to kidnapping. He has declined multiple requests for interviews. He maintains that he told the truth in his confession. He says he doesn't know where Tara is buried. The Valencia County Sheriff's Office continues to investigate. They receive tips regularly. Most lead nowhere, but they follow up on every single one, because they know that the one tip they ignore could be the one that solves the case. Tara's family continues to hope. They have set up a scholarship fund in her name. The Tara Calico Memorial Scholarship is awarded annually to young women in New Mexico who are studying psychology. It's a way to keep Tara's dream alive. She wanted to be a therapist. She wanted to help people. Now, in her absence, she's helping other young women achieve their dreams. Tara Lay Calico was 19 years old when she disappeared. She was a daughter, a girlfriend, a friend, a student. She had hopes, dreams, a future. All of that was stolen from her on a sunny September morning in 1988. For 36 years, her family has lived with the not knowing, the wondering, the hoping, the grieving without closure. They have endured decades of false leads, false hope, heartbreak. But they have never stopped fighting, and neither have the investigators. Because Tara deserves justice, she deserves to be found. She deserves to come home. Somewhere in the vast New Mexico desert, Tara Calico may still be waiting to be discovered, waiting to be brought home, waiting for justice. And until that day comes, her case will remain open. The search will continue. The hope will endure. Because some cases are never truly cold. Some victims are never forgotten. And some mysteries demand to be solved. Tara Calico is one of them. How could someone do this? How could someone see a young woman full of life and promise and decide to destroy her? How could someone take a daughter from her mother? How could someone leave a family to suffer for 36 years with no answers? These are questions we may never fully understand, because the mind of a predator is not something most of us can comprehend. The capacity for such cruelty, such callousness, such evil, it exists. It walks among us, and sometimes it strikes without warning. Tara Calico's case reminds us that evil can hide in it. It reminds us that safety is never guaranteed. It reminds us that the world can be a dangerous place. But it also reminds us of something else: the power of love, the strength of family, the importance of never giving up. Patty Dole spent the last 18 years of her life searching for her daughter. She never found her. But she never stopped trying. That kind of love, that kind of devotion, that's what we should remember. Not just the horror of what happened, but the beauty of a mother's love, the strength of a family's hope, the determination of investigators who refuse to let a case die. Tara Calico has been gone for 36 years, but she is not forgotten. Her name lives on. Her story is still being told, and somewhere someone knows the truth. Someone knows where she is. Someone knows what happened to her. And one day that person may come forward. One day the truth may finally be revealed. One day Tara may finally come home. Until then, we remember her. We honor her. We continue the search. We refuse to let her disappear into the darkness. Because Tara Calico deserves to be found. She deserves peace. And her family deserves closure. The world still struggles to understand this level of cruelty, the senselessness of it, the brutality of it, the waste of a beautiful young life. But we must remember. We must stay vigilant. We must protect each other. We must never assume that evil only happens to other people, because it can happen to anyone, anywhere at any time. This case reminds us that evil can hide in plain sight. It reminds us to trust our instincts. It reminds us to stay alert. It reminds us that the people we love can be taken us in an instant. And it reminds us that we must never, ever give up on the missing, because they deserve to be found. They deserve to be brought home. They deserve to rest in peace. Thank you for listening to the story of Tara Calico. This case has haunted investigators, true crime enthusiasts, and Tara's family for over 3 decades. It remains one of the most heartbreaking unsolved disappearances in American history. If you have any information about Tara's disappearance, please contact the Valencia County Sheriff's Office in New Mexico. No tip is too small. No detail is insignificant. You could be the one who finally brings Tara home. If you found this case compelling, please leave a comment telling me what you think happened to Tara. Do you believe David's confession? Do you think the Polaroid photograph is really her? Do you think she's still out there somewhere? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into true crime cases. Rest easy, everyone. Keep Tara Calico in your thoughts, and remember to stay vigilant, stay safe, and always trust your instincts. Good night and stay safe.